the elders would be respect, something to retire on. That's our message. Very simple.
Now, I mean, prior to making these trips across Liberia on your campaign trail, your observation, what you is if it contrasts to what you believed then was the existing situations in these countries.
We always knew, you know, this is not my first, as I said, not my first rodeo, right? It's not my first train ride. I was involved very heavily 2016, 2017 election. But that the level of poverty has increased. Let me just be very honest with you. The last time I visited the country was in 2017. Okay. You know, and I come now again because you don't have an opportunity to go into the rural areas and visit the country the way you do when you are campaigning. Mm-hmm. It has gotten worse. The level of suffering has gotten worse. The people are upset. The people are angry. So I always knew it existed, but to see it the way I have seen it this time, it is, well, I keep saying it is alarming. And something else that happens that I did not notice in 2017 is the drug epidemic. In 2017, 2016, we know the drug use was plenty. It was plenty. I know that we came to Center Street 2017 to go give some rice during the election, and it's a funny story we always tell because they live rice, what we boy and what pick up some money, many with us that day, all the so-called scheme and basically threatening to store all the rice when they pick up. So these were drug users 2017. But the level of drug use that we see, I can give you an example now, or should we wait and come back to that question?
We'll get
okay, so that's the difference. Okay. It has always been there, but it is at a heightened level for the past 6 years.
Okay. Maybe you need to just tell us, Charlie, what's in the CPP's manifesto? You know, what is it? What do you want to do differently? What are the issues? Building the economy, how will you do it? What is it? What's in your manifesto?
Okay, thank you. So, you know, Mr. Cummings, everyone knows that Mr. Cummings area, and sometimes I would try to speak in very simple language so everyone can understand what I'm saying. Everyone knows that Mr. Cummings' era is creating jobs. The economy, management. I saw the president the other day. The president was talking about Mr. Cummings. It scared me that the president of Liberia will go on a campaign trail and say to the Liberian people, what you know about you put water in Coca-Cola bottle and shake it? That Coca-Cola bottle. Then he tried to compare, to analogize Coca-Cola Global to Coca-Cola Factory. So it maybe the president doesn't even understand what M&Es are in global multinational enterprises. Mr. Cummings, I want Liberian people to know, because those of you who may be supporting or had listened to what the president said, let me explain to you. The president does not work, and he never worked for Coca-Cola Factory.
You mean Cummings?
Excuse me, Mr. Cummings. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about January of next year. Is that why I'm calling him the president?
Okay.
Y'all forgive me, because we know we'll win this election. But the future president, Mr. Cummings, has never worked for Coca-Cola Factory yet in Liberia. Liberian people, I want to explain something to you in the most simplest terms. There's something that corporates on global and corporate law, I can give you. It's a term called M&E. It stands for multinational enterprise. That means a big company. We're all over the world. Some of the biggest companies that Coca-Cola, Nike, Samsung, Apple, the big companies, they can be in different countries. That's why they call multinationals. Some of these companies, their entire budget bigger than some countries' budget. For instance, Coca-Cola Global, I say Coca-Cola Factory. Coca-Cola Global, their budget is over $1 billion United States dollars. $1 billion. Liberia budget last year was $800 million. The whole country budget, Liberia, our budget smaller, much smaller than the company budget. The company, Mr. Cummings, the only Liberian and one of the few Africans that was at the highest level sitting in America. He was the chief administrative officer. That means all the administration, all the management, he was the one in charge of it. hundreds of thousands of employees that he were managing them. $1 billion budget that he was managing them. Before he even reached to that place, for white men, for American men to interview you, to select you, they're not small thing. He had to go through so many interviews for people to look at his resume. They black men, they short African men able to do their work. They say, yeah, he able. After he did the work, he did so well. He performed so well at Coca-Cola that he retired very honorably. That means he performed excellently. Liberia don't need no politician. We do not need another politician. Liberians have had politicians for decades and he has left us in the worst situation we have been in. Liberians need management, somebody who understands money. Somebody who can look at money and say 1 + 1 = 2. Look, but if I do something with it, $2 here. If I know how to invest it, if I know how to talk to the right people to make sure that $2 here, we can make it to be $6 in 1 week. And then when we make it to be $6, then we know how to spend that $6 so that we will not be in deficit, will not be in debt, will not have to credit. That is what Mr. Cummings know how to do. When you bring somebody like Mr. Cummings, because I want our number one platform to create jobs. To create jobs. How we create jobs? Number one, the company is a $1 million company who can't invest here in Liberia. They will not invest in it. They will not invest in the past government because the past government, we had enough corruption. That was 2017. Oh, you told Uncle Joe, thank you, but no thank you. You told United Party, 14-1. 2017, you say thank you, but no thank you. You have squandered our money. You're not able to create jobs. You say let's try the young man. Your boy, the young man, His Excellency John Manawia, you see what he has done. No company in that Liberia. I'm talking small company. No big investor in that here because they don't trust the government. They believe that the government will squander the money or they will eat the money. So, Mr. Cummings, number one, you must have confidence. The international people must have confidence in the leaders of their country before they bring the money. Mr. Cummings and myself, we have clean hands. Nobody can say Charlyne pursuing corrupt. Nobody can say Mr. Cummings not eat anybody's money. Number one. So we will be able to attract international investors. Number two, when the investors come, we know how to properly manage the money that the investors will be bringing. We know how to properly manage the budget so that there can be skilled workers. The investors will not be happy if the people in Liberia can now manage the work. Because we want foreigners to come to the country, then they bring also foreigners to work. We want Liberians to be able to do the job. But if they come, we don't have people to do the job, then they said we get tired, they will leave us, they will go to Ghana, they will go to Nigeria, they will go to Sierra Leone. So Mr. Cummings wants to make sure that he manages our educational budget in such a way that we begin to train our people properly. That we begin to focus some of our money not just in traditional education, but vocational skills training. So that's something else that we will do. We will also focus on our agriculture. Not everything should be foreigners coming in. I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible and as simply as possible. Not everything will be foreigners coming into the country. We must make sure that we empower Liberians so that we too have our own sector, our own area where we're not dependent on foreigner coming in. So we make sure that what do? We make sure that we work with farmers in the first 100 days of our administration. We'll be having various symposiums and gatherings and engagements with our farmers so they excuse me, can inform us about what they need, what some of the disadvantages they are having, how we can help them. We make sure to capitalize and provide money to our Liberian farmers. We make sure we provide the right products, the right seeds, that we help them to mechanize certain farming so that Liberians are growing not just for themselves, but eventually to feed others. Our ambassador the other day, I saw some women on the road. I was up to somebody's house and they were growing pineapple. Everywhere I go recently, particularly in Grand Bassa County, I see the rice farms. So we have the capacity. Somebody brought guava to me the other day. When I was growing up, that all the things they were selling it was growing it right in Liberia. We have the capacity to grow our fruits, to grow vegetables, to grow our rice. I see rice farm in Bassa, but we don't have the right systems and the right governments who have the political will to make sure that our people are empowered to do it. So let me just sum up very quickly. Investor, we want to attract investors. We want to make sure that our foreign relations policy is one that is very nationalistic underpinnings, and one that is also set in such a way that it benefits us economically. So any engagements we have with foreign partners, Liberia should economically be benefited from it. So we're attracting these companies. We are empowering our young people. We're training them. We're building human capital, right? So our people have the opportunity and the capacity to work. And we must also invest in training and invest in our agriculture sector, in a nutshell.
Okay. Let's just expand on the investment portfolio a bit. In order to have people buy, you must have a good product to sell. What is the CPP's idea about attracting investors? Which specific sectors in Liberia do you intend to use in order to attract investors? We all know that our mining sector, is not as attractive as it used to be. The prices of our products on the global market have all dwindled. So which sectors now does the CPP intend to use as that product to sell?
Thank you.
To attract investors?
I think we want to talk about commodities here. We talked about even farming. We talked about our, whether it is exporting. Let me say something as easy as, let's talk about pineapples. I said I've seen so many pineapple farmers. We can start growing pineapples, drying, something as simple as working with our people to dry goods, to dry our pineapples, dry mango, dry watermelon, pineapple, ginger, mango, sell dried goods. We could begin manufacturing here. We could have foreign investors come and help us in our manufacturing sector. How do we build different manufacturing companies so that we begin to manufacture things here? I talked about dried goods. Let's talk about something that is so simple, something that we could make so much money from, and to help in our health and hygiene sector, even wash our water sector as well. If you drive along any beachways in Liberia or any city in Liberia, the amount of trash from plastic bottles, from the satchels that we see polluting our environment, is a very simple and quick way to make money by bringing in a recycling plant here. We get these plastic water bottles, these satchels. We pay people in the local communities to collect these bottles, collect these satchels. We create a recycling company here that's either owned by Liberians, or it could even be owned by the government, but we employ Liberians to begin to recycle some of these plastic bottles. What do we do with the recycled plastic? We create chairs. There are people who are doing it today. What we do with the plastic chairs? We sell them to schools. We sell them to churches. Then we begin to empower Liberian companies to also work in this recycling industry. Recycling, exporting commodities, food, beyond the dry goods we talked about. In Nigeria, they create noodles, things, they manufacture packaged food that they sell. There's so many ideas. We don't, and I love the premise of your question. We don't have to stay with the extractive industry. We understand what the extractive industry has done to Liberia, to Africa as a whole. As a matter of fact, you see many of these countries now who are having they are coups, the francophone countries. Many of them now are saying, you will not take our minerals in our extractive industry and have a monopoly on them, and you're stripping our country of its wealth, and we're not getting the proper investment we should. But we need to be innovative in how we think. So but why can't we export rice? Why can't, so there's so many areas, but manufacturing is one. Recycling is one. Our food, commodities, those are different ways that we intend to be creative in ensuring that we get investors here.
Okay, you spoke about the need to build the capacity of Liberians in order to prepare them for the job market. And some of those things you talk about was investment in education. And those are some of the things that have been done by this government. For example, the revitalization of TVET institutions, the free tuition policy, and what have you. How do you intend to do it differently the CPP government?
Thank you. So let's start talking about free tuition. This government has done a very good job, not great, but it's done a decent job of marketing a failed policy. A bill of goods, as they say to the public, that they have provided free tuition. First of all, you provide free tuition, but then you increase the cost of registration, you increase the cost of other things. So parents still don't really have the opportunity, and children really are not afforded free education. Number one. Number two, you claim to be providing free education, but the economy has plummeted. So children still don't have, the families don't have the opportunity to be able to even purchase the textbooks for our children. The government has ravished the economy. So we're funding that should be going to the education sector so that even if there is free education, the school buildings are properly built, are properly secured, that there are chairs, there are benches, there are chalkboards, the teachers are being paying well. None of that has happened. So the government will not sit here and say that they have built capacity and given to the education and improved the education system. The government has failed the education system. Everywhere we go, the cries is another thing the cries we're hearing. A vast majority of the teachers are volunteer teachers. That only here in Monrovia, you always see teachers getting paid. You're going to rural areas, teachers are not getting paid. Was somewhere a couple of days ago, I forget where we were, 4 teachers for 300 students. None of them getting paid. The government has failed miserably, and it should not come here and make anyone to believe.
Which part of Liberia are you talking about?
It was in, I think it's Bassa, because usually it's Bassa or Cape Mau or Bomi were in the last time. I'm sure it's Bassa because I spent a lot of time in Grand Bassa County. The government has failed miserably when it comes to education. So they should not even try and say that they have done something and what will we do differently. Number one, what we will do differently is that we'll reapportion the budgetary allotment. In Liberia, the percentage of allotment for the education sector is about 12%. I think this is what the budget, the current government and legislature allotted to education last year. In Ghana, in Kenya, in other African countries, the budgetary allotment for education averages about 24%, 24 to 26%. We are at 12%. So a Cummings Brumskine administration will begin to re-allot percentages to education. When we begin to do that, number one, then we're showing Liberia that we are serious about education, which the current government has not done. When we do that, then we begin to make sure that the budgetary allotment for education, there's a higher percentage going to training our teachers. Because no matter what we do, we cannot train students if the teachers are not trained, number one, and if the teachers are not paid properly. The government has failed to do that. When you talk about technical and vocational training, once again, who are training these people? And how much money is going when only 12% of our $800 million is going towards education? So Cummings Brumskine administration intends to ensure that a larger amount is allotted to education. Our teachers, our trainers are paid better. Our schools have proper infrastructure so that our learning environment for the children is improved. We want to make sure that we have benches, as I said. We want to have the proper books. We want to have chairs. We want to have latrines. We want to have places where the children can be able to use the bathroom. We want to be able to provide food for our children to eat. If our children aren't eating properly, if they're not malnourished, if they're malnourished in schools, they're not going to be able to retain proper information.
Marcus, you want to ask a question?
Yes, and my question is around this issue of decentralization. We understand that the previous administration invested some money into decentralizing the administration. We saw the construction of county service centers across the country. There are reports that some of them are not, functional. However, what is the CPP's policy on government decentralization?
If you read our manifesto, so we released our manifesto very recently. So we believe we are going to be a government that believes in decentralization. But decentralization, I want our people to understand, our administration is going to be primarily led and oriented in an economic empowerment platform. Everything we do, even as it relates to decentralization, will be based on how do we expand our economy? How do we create a climate that brings more jobs into our country, that essentially expands our tax base? So when you talk about decentralization, I want to move away from the idea that we always talk about it from a government perspective, a governance perspective. How do we even decentralize the economy? Mr. Cummings and I want to tell you, one of the things that attracted me to the vice presidency was when I was running for representative in Grand-Bassa County in Buchanan. Something I repeatedly talked about to my constituents is that we need to decentralize the economic hubs in Liberia. When you look at every developed or developing nation, almost first world, I don't like to use that term first world, but we know what it means. They have a political capital and an economic capital. I've spoken to Clarence about this before. Nigeria, Abuja is the political capital. Lagos is where the economy of the country happens. In the U.S., Washington, D.C., New York, everywhere. We talked about how do we decentralize the economic wealth or focus out of Monrovia into a place like Buchanan or Ganta or other places. Because I'm from Grand-Bassa County, I always use Buchanan as my reference. Your excuse me, he's smiling. Your excuse me. There is no reason that. So Ganta right now is a booming city. It's a booming town. How do we ensure that the government here in Liberia begins to invest more? Ganta is booming because the Nibayans, some of them, tend to be very business savvy and have an entrepreneurial spirit. So the private sector is booming in Ganta because the Nibayans say we want private sector to boom in Ganta. What is the government doing to ensure to expand the tax base in other cities outside of Monrovia? Look at Buchanan, for instance. There is no reason that Buchanan should not be one of the most robust commercial cities in Liberia. To everybody who's listening, when I talk about Buchanan, it is not to benefit the Bostonians. It's not to benefit us. This idea benefits Liberia as a whole. Buchanan has a port that rivals the Freeport here. Buchanan's port, about some experts have said, I am not a maritime expert, but I believe that the berth, when you go to the berthing capacity at the port of Buchanan is better than the Freeport here. What policies have been passed by this government, this legislature, current legislature, even the executive branch, the Ministry of Commerce, the maritime, to say let's try to decentralize, let's push more imports and to the port of Buchanan. When we begin to decentralize, when we begin to incentivize or pass any type of tax incentives, so that we have some of these shipping, some of these freights and coming into the port of Buchanan as opposed to everything coming into Monrovia, that's a way to begin to decentralize economically our country. Look what in the Southeast, the President Pro Tem, the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, the Minister of Finance, the President, they are all from the Southeast. If we as a government, as a country, decided that we wanted to truly begin to decentralize, today the Southeast cannot be reached without going through Ivory Coast. Roads, they have boasted about roads. I don't know what roads have been fixed in the Southeast so that we begin to make sure that products, goods, commodities get to the Southeast faster, that the ports in Maryland, in Sino, are more accessible for commercial trade. These are all of the things that the Cummings Brumskine administration we have been talking about from a commercial perspective, not just from a governance perspective, but how do we ensure that money reaches out of Monrovia into the other the leeward counties? I don't know if that isn't, who asked that? You asked that.
Okay.
Yeah, I want us to talk a bit about job creation, because when you talk about investments, then it comes to jobs. So the job that we have here now, we hear all the time complaints about bad labor practices. Most of our people are concerned. Okay, they got nothing to do, but then the people who they're working for treat them anyhow. So we have two instruments that govern our labor sector, one in the private and one in the public sector, right? What is the CPP's idea about ensuring that our people get equal pay for equal labor, or that the jobs that they get, even the ones you hope to create, will serve the purpose for their labor, because the people are concerned about their labor. They work too much and get too little. How would the CPP address that?
Okay, let me ask you a question. You said that there are two mechanisms, one the private, one the public. What were you referring to?
Two instruments.
Uh-huh.
They have the Decent
Work Act, which is the law, the labor law, covers the labor law.
Yeah, no. There are two instruments. The Decent Work Act covers the private sector, and they have the civil service standing order, something that covers the public
civil service standing rules.
Okay. So you're talking about the law.
there are two different instruments.
So the Decent Work Act is the law, the labor law that governs all labor relations, including concession agreements, including every employee, whether you are even if you're not a Liberian national, if you work in Liberia, you are protected by the Decent Work Act of Liberia. Now, the Decent Work Act provides a minimum wage. The Decent Work Act is and I can say to you, the Decent Work Act, because I'm a lawyer, the Decent Work Act, many people have complained that the Decent Work Act actually overly protects employees. I think what needs to happen, because what often happens in Liberia is the laws are on the books, but the laws are not properly enforced. So we're talking about labor, but even we talk about drugs. So no more drug law again. The laws are on the books. How do we enforce it? Now, your question is, many Liberian employees feel that they are not protected. We need to, number one, everything we do in this country it has its origins in two ways. Number one, in the law, and number two, in our orientation, how we think and how we see ourselves as Liberians. Let's talk about the law first. The law is there to protect our employees. But we as Liberians, we need to make sure that we begin to have a sense of we must care for ourselves, because some of the very employers, they're not just foreigners. It is Liberian employers who are not protecting Liberian employees. So what a CPP government, the laws are there. So we can't say that the laws have not been written to protect the employees. What we want to do is make sure that the laws are enforced properly. So if an employee feels that they have not been protected, they have the opportunity to go number one to the Ministry of Labor. That's where everything begins. You go to the Ministry of Labor. If you're not in Monrovia, if you are out in the Leeward areas, they have these administrative offices that you go and you file complaints. You file a complaint. If your complaint is heard by the administrative officer, if you like it, you can appeal then to the labor court, the National Labor Court. If someone comes, because the issue is not a legal issue, and that's why I want to defer with you a little bit. The laws are there. Perhaps the people are not being protected because of enforcement at the courts. I think what we need to do, to answer your question, because I want to take my legal hat off and put my political hat on, because I was answering as a lawyer. Politically, what we need to do is, number one, I think we need to empower more Liberian businesses, number one. Because the executive branch, Mr. Cummings and myself, if there is a foreign company that we see, and this is going to be a very political answer, and some people may not like it, but this is how the government works. As the executive, if a foreign company is mistreating Liberian workers, we need to ensure that the judiciary branch takes the proper action, and the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Commerce, whichever companies have given that foreign company the opportunity and the authority to act and do business in our country, that they're investigated, that they are, and if the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Labor determines that this company has been violating the rights of Liberian employees, then that branch will take the requisite action. But I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question. I'm not really sure because your question is, what would the Brumskine administration do to protect employees? Right? Is that your question?
To protect the employees, to protect jobs that are meant for Liberians.
All of those things are on the books. They're all on the books. The Ministry, the Decent Work Act has a very clear provisions that state that certain foreign companies. Okay, let me give you. Okay. Let me give you another example. Let me break it down. Asala Metal. Let me give you this example. Asala Metal came to Liberia. Asala Metal is ripping. I don't want to use the word raping. So I would say stripping Liberia of one of its most cherished resources. Today in Grand Bassa County, ArcelorMittal's concession agreement they have not complied with requirements in their concession agreement. They were supposed to build hospitals and clinics and build a washing plant. Certain things they were supposed to do that they have not done in Liberia. I want you to hear me now because I think this is a more practical example. The legislatures should have made sure that when ArcelorMittal did not comply with its responsibilities in the concession agreement, that number one, the company would have been called to a hearing, an investigative hearing. The government of Liberia, through the executive branch, I don't know if they have done this or not, but should have called in the CEO and the heads of this company to make sure that as the legislature is investigating, the executive branch is also having some background conversations with this concessionaire to find out why they're not compliant. So the political will, because I think I finally am understanding what your question is, it's not at the low level. It is when these foreign companies come into Liberia, how will the Cummings Brumskine administration make sure to protect the Liberian workers? So we ensure that our executive branch has these relationships so that they're calling them behind the scenes to make sure they're compliant with their requirements in the concession agreement. A Cummings Brumskine administration will be very engaged with the legislative branch so that we are sure, because the legislature should be primarily responsible. They're the ones who sign these concession agreements. They're the ones who are handing over our resources to these foreign companies to make sure that they're not just pocketing money. You saw what happened with B Mountain a couple of weeks ago, but that they too are ensuring that these companies are complying with their agreements. It comes down to political will. I'm sorry, let me wrap it up because it took me a while to really get what the question you were asking. It comes down to political will, Clarence. It comes down to Mr. Cummings being strong enough and saying that we do not care how much money you're bringing to this country, but if you're not treating our workers properly, if you're not complying with your requirements in the concession agreement, that will make sure that you are investigated, that there are hearings, you're called to a senatorial hearing or hearing at the House, and that our executive branch will begin to engage and make sure this is
okay, Councillor. Let me ask you this one, then probably we can move on to the land. And it depends on who you talk to. The issue about corruption in Liberia, it is not possible to talk about Liberia as a nation state without talking about corruption. It differs from one administration to another. Recently, the legislature amended the law giving the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission prosecutorial authority. Again, there were a lot of misunderstanding about the way the law was amended, intending to take the executive chair and all the other people. Give us a practical example of how a Cummings Brumskine ticket would deal with corruption in Liberia.
Practical. Very practical. Corruption starts with the leaders. Very practical example. I was reading the manifesto last night. The first thing I saw in the manifesto that I didn't like, was none of our family members will be employed in government. I have personal issue with it.
You and Mr. Cummings.
You might not put me inside. I'm joking. Y'all laugh. That joke. Who? That means if you Minister of Commerce, then your grandchild cannot be discuss that. But it is something that Mr. Cummings takes corruption so seriously at a very practical level that he doesn't want any appearance of nepotism. That justice system, the judicial branch, to end this culture of impunity where you can do anything you want to, you get away with it. But number 3, we must change our orientation as Liberians. We just us talking now. All of us, we have created a culture where we just letting it slide. This is not corrupt, we just let it go. But when we begin to engage, that's why everywhere I go, I talk to the young people, I talk to the women. How can we change? How can we create a better Liberia? How can we begin to love ourselves? How can we today, we are voting, let's talk, can I deviate a little bit from corruption and talk about politics a little bit?
Yeah, why not?
Have I answered your question? Can I talk about Yeah, yes or
Well,
no?
yeah, we have. It is our right to ask you, and it is your right to answer. You
Okay.
You know, you necessarily don't have to answer the way we want.
And before you get to
That-
politics, because I'm concerned about this, your healthcare policy. I mean, Liberia.
maybe we can do that
Yeah.
2-3 minutes.
Yeah,
because we take
just
the
quickly,
last.
yeah.
Okay. So we have talked about, so our healthcare policy has been one of, we want to ensure that, once again, much of this boils down to budget. Much of this boils down to corruption. Liberia is not without money. Liberia, we are a country of about 4 point something million, as citizens. We have a budget.
5.2 million.
5.2? Okay,
Yeah.
it ranged from 4 to 5. So most recent 5.2. 5.2 million people who live in this country. We have a budget of about 800 million. Okay? We are a small enough country that the budget that we have should be able to properly manage our country. The issue is not about resources at this stage. The issue is about management. Our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is not properly equipped. It's not properly managed because of corruption, because of lack of proper appropriation of funds. The Brumskine administration wants to ensure, number one, first and foremost, that local governments, local county governments are allotted proper budgetary allotments for the hospitals to provide preventive care, to provide treatments to our people. Number one. We want to make sure, this is something that we've talked about for quite some time, that in order to keep a healthy and stable country, that we begin to take preventative measures. We want to make sure that our nurses, our doctors are paid properly. I know that the CDC government claims that they have increased the payments from the salary of doctors. I think they said from $700 to $2,000. There's no evidence of that we have seen. And even if the doctors have been, their salaries have been increased, how is that trickling down to the average Liberian who is in the rural area? Clinics were in Magibi County the other day. The local clinic there, no generator. They're asking us to help them buy a generator and be able to fuel it.
Is it a public health facility?
It's a public health facility.
Okay, Councillor Brumskine, let's let's go to the line and take a few callers because we got 6 minutes. We got to end this thing on time. 0777 if you're listening to Truth FM, Prime, ABC Radio, or OKFM, call 0777 700 995. 0555 995 995 0555 026 995. Hello.
Good morning, Prime Minister Jackson and your family in Nigeria. Good morning to the countryman in Nigeria.
Good morning. Just call your name and go straight.
And my Abraham political Montesquieu, and I come from the headquarters of the Veterans Bill on the most of Well Avenue in Dogo Village. I listened to the vice president made to Alexander Cummings. That platform is unique. But we have the greatest platform with the coalition of democratic platform.
I thought you would have asked a question. Hello?
Morning, Cllr.
Yeah?
I'm calling from Jamaica.
Okay.
I'm saying good morning to the lawyer in there. Because there in Ghana, there's a case that grew on there, but I don't want to very difficult now, but they want us to give me a number, or you can give us a number.
Okay, keep following the show. That one a personal thing. Hello? Good morning.
Thanks for having me. This is Matt Toku.
Yeah.
I appreciate you and your panelists wanting to have the chat.
She's listening.
Thank you. I listened to her very kindly and she spoke well, but I'm concerned that Mr. Cummings, who is the senator of the ANC or the CPP, always say that you cannot keep doing one thing over and over and expect different results. Now, these people that behind the likes of the likes of Whistle, the likes of they have a lot of things out there for what they have very bad.
My man, nobody would take enjoy and bring them to work in Liberia. Cummings, I thought he can. You asking where about some of the policies.
I feel that that work with the board of the court, the judiciary denied them.
Okay, thank you. I think somebody spoke about. I think we need to get Councillor Brumskine back here for 2 solid hours.
Yeah.
We need to
I
plan
think
that
so,
sometimes
yeah,
next
because-
week. Let 1 hour in plenty.
1 hour in
We need to
plenty.
get her back here for 2 solid hours. Councillor Brumskine, go ahead. Respond. Yeah.
Oh, respond?
Yeah.
Okay. But the gentleman was asking about the bad labor practice. You know, I should have addressed it better because it seems to be an issue that is alarming. So let me say to all of you, Mr. Cummings and myself, one thing that we have that I think the other tickets may not have, because you have seen them, is a political will to truly change this country. We know that the current administration has no political will to fight any bad practices. We have seen it. We see what happened with Cllr Metal. We see what happened with B Mounting. They are renewing all of these contracts. We have consistently raised alarms about what AML has done in Bassa and other counties. A Cummings Brumskine administration will ensure that we put Liberia and Liberians first. It is important we understand that we must treat our international partners with respect, because we want to attract these people, these companies, these enterprises to come to our country. But at the same time, we must show a sense of nationalism. We must let these foreigners know that we Liberians believe in Liberia first and will fight for Liberia first. This is what I was trying to say when I talked about our foreign relation policy must even be one where it is rooted in economic expansion for Liberians. Economic expansion does not mean you come, you take our resources, you force our people to work for you, and then you don't treat them properly. We will have the political will to ensure that when you coming into our country, first and foremost, Liberians, but then we'll work with our partners in the legislative branch and the executive members to make sure that these people are brought to bear. So that is the question with respect to the employees. Now, this man was asked about the Cummings Brumskine administration and corrupt people. I don't know. He mentioned Wisner name. What Wisner got to do with corruption again? Wisner, and I think Wisner has been deemed corrupt by any government, by any corruption was used most. It was used in the 12 years of the Unity Party government. That very government, y'all went and paraded on the street on Sunday. Nobody want to talk corruption, yo. Don't bring corruption business when it comes to Cummings and Brumskine, because we got anybody around us that squandered the resources of the country for 12 years. Squandered more so than the CEC been in for 6 years, but we'll deal with CEC because CEC power.